Hey, good morning everybody. This is Denise at Lazy K Homestead. This morning I am going to make my homemade sourdough bread. Now it might be a couple videos because it does take time. So what the recipe is 4 cups of bread flour, and I use white lily bread flour. It's really nice and soft. It is 1 cup of warm milk to about 135, 140. A packet of yeast, which I'll go ahead and put in there now. Just 1 packet of yeast. And I use our honey from our Homestead. And I go ahead and I mix that in there, and that is 3 tablespoons. It's not an exact measure. If you wanted to use white sugar, it would be 3 tablespoons of white sugar. Okay. And 2 tablespoons of softened butter in 1 cup of bread flour. You just put that down in there, kind of in the middle. And 2½ teaspoons of salt. And I make sure that my salt is just kind of mixed in with the flour, because if you mix it with your yeast, it will kill your yeast. So that's about half. So 2½ teaspoons. Okay? And I just mix it around with my finger or fork, whatever you want to do. But it's mixed with that flour, you can see. And there's the butter. Okay, we're waiting for the yeast to bloom. And what that means is it starts to froth up, and it'll have a nice head on it, just like a Coca-Cola or a beer, or whatever you know to have a head on it. And that'll take just a couple minutes. But in the meantime, I wanted to show you my starter. Now, if you watch any of the short videos that I've done, I started 2 years ago with making a mother starter for my sourdough. And my auntie, she had sourdough starter like this for over 50 years. And this is 2 years old right now. So let me see if I can get this to come in a little bit. All this is not self-rising, all-purpose flour and warm distilled water. It's best not to use tap water. If you have a well, you can use that, but when you're feeding it, you need to use warm water, just lukewarm water, and that helps it. But anyways, you can see a couple. Let me come over there and see if you can see a couple of the bubbles that are down in there. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So for this recipe, you use 2 cups of starter, fed starter. Now my fed starter is right here. Let me show you this. Bring it over to the camera. This is the fed starter, and you can see how bubbly it is. And that'll be a little over 2 cups. And what your pour off is, you can put back in your starter jar and put it back in the fridge, and when you're ready to feed it again, you just mix it in there and just feed it accordingly to my other videos. Whatever your measurement in grams are with this, you do equal parts of all-purpose flour or bread flour and warm distilled water, and that is feeding your starter. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that over here. And our yeast is starting to bloom. So we kind of just have to wait on that. And I just pour it right in here on top of that butter. And I just mix it around. Some people mix with their hand. I usually use a wooden spoon. This is my bread spoon. So while we're doing that, I'm going to mix that salt in with that flour, so it's kind of distributed and it's not in there to kill the yeast. Once we get this together, we will knead it for 8 minutes. I found that is the perfect amount of time to knead it, and then you put it back in a grease bowl and let it rise for about 2 hours. And then you bring it out, you punch it down because it's about double. It's going to be double your size that you put in there. I put a loose piece of plastic and then a cotton cloth over it in a warm area. Not hot, but a warm area. And then you punch it down, you pour it out on your table that you're going to use, and which will be this one again. And then you let it rest for 15 minutes. Cut it in half because it makes 2 loaves, and then you go ahead and put it in your loaf pan. I'll have a video. Now this may be 2 parts because it is long, like I said before, and I'll have all of that in here. It may not have the rising, but it'll have the main parts of this. Okay, so our yeast has a nice head on it. Let's see if I can come over there and show you this. Can't really show it to you in there, but it's got a real nice head on it. You can see that. Okay, so what we do is you just take this, pour it right in on that melted butter, and 1 cup of the bread flour with the salt. And I've got the honey already in there, so I go ahead and I get that out. And now we'll mix this together. Melted butter, salt, 1 cup of bread flour, and your yeast and milk. Oh, I forgot to say, it's 1 cup of milk that you put your yeast in with your 3 tablespoons of honey or sugar, whatever you prefer. I prefer the honey because I think it's more natural. I don't have anything against white sugar at all. I know some people do, but that's a personal preference. Okay, so this is all nicely mixed. See, it's all nicely mixed there. And what we'll do now is we will measure out 2 cups of the risen starter that has been fed in my 2-cup measure. And it's nice and fluffy and bubbly, and that's what you want because you know that it's going to be a good leavening agent. And I use 2 cups. Okay, there you go, 2 cups. The excess will go back into my starter jar and back in the fridge. Okay, so we'll go ahead and put this in here. And again, we'll mix it up. You don't have to like mix it real well because it folds in really nicely. And you don't want to kill any yeast or the starter, but you just kind of fold it, kind of mix it around like that, and you'll see that it mixes pretty well. Okay, so there's that. Now, this is my 3 cups of extra bread flour that we're going to go ahead and put in here. And I just put a little bit at a time. Like I said, some people dump it in, some people use their hands to mix this. It's completely up to you. I just choose to use this wooden spoon because that's how my great aunt made all her bread, was with a wooden spoon and a bread bowl. And this heavy duty bread bowl here, I just love it. I found it at a thrift shop for $5. I love to thrift shop, and any treasure that I can find and use on the homestead, that is, I always think about, well, who had this before me, and what did they use it for, and try to just keep using it. Alright, so we are getting to where it's pretty stiff. This is going to be kind of a sticky dough. Once you get it all nicely mixed in there, folding it over, you will have to use your hands at some point, of course, to knead it. And I think right now is a good time to do that. So I'll go ahead and I'll just turn it over, trying to incorporate the rest of the flour in there with it until we get a really nice ball of dough. Okay. Okay. I'll go ahead and turn this out on here. I'll put a little bit of my bread flour here. Turn it out on there. I'll try to clean up a little bit as I go. Okay, so there is your dough. Okay, and before I go to start kneading this for 8 minutes, I go ahead and I take vegetable oil. You can use canola oil, you can use olive oil, whatever kind of cooking oil you have. Just make a little, well, put maybe a teaspoon of oil in there. That'll help the dough stay nice and moist, and it also gives it a little bit more fat. So I'm going to go ahead and knead this for 8 minutes, and then I'll be back. Okay, we're back. It's been 8 minutes. Here is my dough. Now I do 8 minutes because it's really good, but a lot of people will check with what's called window painting. So if you stretch your dough and you can see through it, that is window painting, where you can see through your dough and you know it's been nicely kneaded and it's ready to go. So there's my dough. Here's the bowl again. I just scraped out the little bit of flour that was in there. I just used vegetable oil. Probably put a couple tablespoons in here, maybe a little bit more. You don't want it to be greasy, just enough to where your dough isn't going to stick to the sides, and it will add a little bit of fat. So there's my nice dough. Feels like a baby's butt. That's what my aunt always said. So you just go ahead and you put it in there, and then you turn it upside down. And there you are. The dough is there and ready to go in a nice warm place to rise. I go ahead and I just loosely put a piece of flat plastic over it. Can't talk today for some reason. Okay. And that doesn't want to work either, but this is real life. Nothing's perfect. Okay. Alright. So, just loosely set it on top. And let me grab my, what I call my bread rising cloth, and it's just a piece of cotton. Just gently put it over that. So we'll let this go for a couple hours, and hopefully this video will continue. If not, I'll have another video right after and show you the rest of this. But before I go, I want to let you know that you rise this, let it rise for about 2 hours, or until it's double of what the size is inside the bowl. So for this, it'll be just a nice risen, maybe 2 inches over this bowl. Then you take it out, you pour it out, you punch it down, you pour it out. I'll pour it back on this table on my pastry mat. Let it rest 15 minutes, cut it in half, and then I'll show you how I roll it up and put it in my bread pans. Makes 2 loaves. And then you let in the bread pans rise about an hour, maybe to an hour and a half, depending on how warm your house is, because you want it to rise maybe an inch and a half over your bread pan, not too much more, because you don't want to overproof it, because if you overproof it and you take your plastic off and you put it in your oven, it will fall, which happens to me sometimes too if I get sidetracked and not thinking about my bread. And the bread will be in a 375 oven for 20 minutes, and then it'll be perfect. It's got the greatest flavor. Everybody likes it that I have given it to, and I do sell this on the Homestead, which is just another little way to make a little money. I'll be making biscotti later. That's something else with my Italian-Irish heritage. I make that and I sell that too, which is so much fun. I just enjoy doing it. Anyway, y'all have a great day, and I will be back soon with the first rise.